Welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're about to dive deep into some truly fascinating psychological research. We are going to unpack a world that is just wildly misunderstood, and that is the minds of low-stakes poker players. Now, if you've ever sat down at a casino poker table, you know the cast of characters, right? But today, we aren't just looking at them. We are going to learn how to read them. We're going to decode the emotional fingerprints that these players leave behind with literally every single bet they make.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Here is the grand illusion of the game. Most low-stakes poker players sit there thinking poker is fundamentally about the cards in their hand. Well, it isn't. It's not even close. When you sit down at a 1-2 or a 1-3 no-limit holdem table, you're actually stepping into this chaotic, beautiful arena of raw human emotion. You really aren't playing a game of strict math. You are playing against ego, fear, insecurity, boredom, and maybe most importantly, the desperate human need to avoid looking stupid in front of a bunch of strangers.
When you break down what's actually driving the action, the reality is kind of staggering. Just look at how massive the factors of emotion, ego, fear, insecurity, and boredom are compared to that tiny little sliver of actual card strategy. That right there is what makes the game so profitable. The absolute best players at these stakes, they're very rarely math geniuses. They don't have supercomputers hidden in their brains. Instead, they're emotional observers. They understand that most people are completely psychologically transparent once you know what to look for. So they play the people, not the cards.
Section 1. The Ego-Driven Pretenders. Theater over strategy. There is this really fascinating distinction between real aggression and fake aggression. Thanks to all the poker vlogs out there, everybody wants to be the table captain these days. The fake aggressive player is going to try to intimidate you. He splashes his chips around dramatically, he stares people down. But real aggression actually comes from a deep, quiet comfort with risk. Fake aggression, on the other hand, is just emotional theater. They're confusing making a lot of physical movements with actually having skill. And here's their biggest leak. When they bluff, it creates massive internal anxiety. So what do? They stare at you, they monitor your chips desperately, looking for any kind of reaction. Listen, if someone is hyper-focused on your breathing or staring at your face after they bet, they are usually emotionally vulnerable and just absolutely terrified that you're going to call.
And that brings us to a really fun archetype, the hoodie guy. This is the player who watches high-stakes solvers online, buys the expensive poker hoodie, and sits down at a 1-2 table trying to play game theory optimal poker. But here's his fatal flaw. He's imitating advanced strategy against people who literally don't even know what a range is. He'll try to triple-barrel bluff some retired guy who is never, ever folding top pair. He just wants validation that he's the smartest guy in the room. So, the best approach? Just let him overcomplicate things. Let him light his money on fire trying to force high-level concepts on a table full of beginners.
Another member of the ego category is the fake confident bettor. Keep an eye out for these physical tells. They sit unnaturally upright, they throw their chips with way too much force, they physically announce their bet with exaggerated movements. They're radiating this forced alpha energy. But true confidence is relaxed. If a player is actually strong and comfortable, they place their chips naturally. This tense, aggressive chip tossing is driven by an emotional need to intimidate you, specifically because they feel vulnerable. That fake confidence is just masking tension, especially when the pots get big.
Section 2. Anxiety and the Actors. Misinterpreting Weakness.
Now, this brilliantly illustrates the flawed internal logic of the nervous bluffer. Here's how their brain works. They suddenly realize, wow, I haven't bluffed all night, which leads directly to emotional discomfort. That discomfort forces them to just pick a totally terrible spot to bluff, purely to prove to themselves that they can. They aren't bluffing because the strategic timing makes sense. They're doing it out of performance anxiety. They want the bluff to succeed so badly that their breathing actually changes, their voice might crack, and they start overacting. When a player's story makes absolutely zero logical sense and they look highly uncomfortable, you've got a wildly profitable opportunity for a bluff catch.
Now, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum is the absolute legend of the low-stakes room, the quiet old man. Do not underestimate him based on his friendly, quiet demeanor. His superpower is extreme emotional patience. He does not care at all about making a flashy move for a YouTube highlight. He is perfectly comfortable folding his cards for 3 hours straight. So when he finally wakes up and shows sudden, aggressive action on the river, listen to me, he is dramatically under-bluffing. He has exactly what he's representing. This is where you absolutely must have the discipline to execute the hero fold, because against him, your standard one-pair hands are completely dead.
Building on that whole idea of acting, there's a golden rule you have to remember.
Hollywood acting at low stakes is massively weighted toward immense strength. You know exactly the player I'm talking about. The one who lets out this dramatic sigh, gives a big theatrical shrug, mutters something like, I probably don't want to call, and then slides all his chips into the middle. Recreational players almost never balance their acting frequencies. They simply don't act weak as a bluff nearly enough to justify you making a call. So, if they are putting on a theatrical performance of being weak, you have to assume they hold an absolute monster hand. Fold to the theater. Section 3. Chaos and Conversation. Destabilizing the table.
This leads us to the super dangerous phenomenon of emotional contagion. This is exactly what happens when the drunk gambler sits down. He completely ignores math, he ignores logic, and he completely destabilizes the entire table. But psychologically, he's actually really simple to understand. He values stimulation way over profit. Winning just isn't as important to him as the sheer chaotic excitement of the gamble. He hates folding, and he hates being bored. Therefore, attempting any kind of sophisticated bluff against him is just a complete waste of time. He's going to call you down with absolutely nothing just because folding feels too emotionally unsatisfying to him.
So how exactly do we handle this chaos? Well, here is your exploit toolkit. First, bet much bigger for value. When you have a strong hand, make him pay dearly to see it. Second, simplify your decisions. Don't overthink it. Third, reduce your bluffing frequencies entirely. Literally, take them to 0. And finally, and honestly most importantly, you have to maintain absolute emotional detachment. The drunk gambler wants you to join in on his chaos. He wants you to get frustrated and start gambling wider. Do not fall for the emotional contagion. Just sit back, wait for your value hands, and extract his money.
Let's see how this builds when we look at the speech player. You see, humans really struggle to lie naturally while they're improvising. When players start talking during a hand, they generally fall into two camps: the persuader, who talks to manipulate you into folding, and the confessor, who leaks the truth simply because emotional pressure causes verbal overflow. You need to listen to the emotional direction of their words. If they are frantically explaining all the logical reasons why you should call their bet, it is almost never reverse psychology. It's usually just internal panic, disguised as cleverness. Remember, genuinely strong players generally prefer silence.
Consider this incredibly common phrase, "I guess I'll gamble." Just pause for a second and think about how many times you have heard someone mutter this exact phrase while casually tossing in a call at a casino.
Well, here is the psychological translation of that phrase. I have a medium-strength hand, and I desperately need social protection against embarrassment. This is purely an emotional hedge. By announcing to the table that it's just a gamble, they're protecting their fragile ego. Because if they lose the pot, they don't look stupid, right? Because, hey, they already told you they were just gambling. This tells you with near absolute certainty that their hand is capped. They do not hold the nuts. They have a medium hand or a draw, and they are feeling emotionally vulnerable.
You're also going to see this exact same vulnerability in the over-explainer. This is the player who, right after betting, starts building these massive, elaborate verbal logic trees to try and justify their actions. But here's the golden rule. Strong hands are psychologically very easy to carry. Weak hands, however, constantly seek verbal justification. They are over-explaining because they're actually trying to convince themselves just as much as they're trying to convince you. When someone gives you a totally unnecessary explanation for why they bet, just listen carefully. Their discomfort is speaking volumes.
Section 4. The Ultimate Poker Secret. Poker's biggest tell. So think about everything we've discussed so far today. What do you think is the absolute strongest tell in all of live poker?
It's this sudden stillness and silence. When a player who has been social, talkative, and super relaxed all night suddenly goes completely mute and physically motionless during a major hand, you need to pay attention. Their brain has become so highly emotionally invested in the hand that their peripheral social behavior simply shuts down. Their emotional focus has drastically narrowed onto one single thing: outcome protection. They are absolutely terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing and accidentally giving away their monster hand. This sudden transition from relaxed movement to forced frozen stillness is a massive, flashing neon indicator of immense strength.
It really all comes back to one fundamental truth. Humans are emotional creatures pretending to be logical under pressure. The biggest secret in low-stakes poker is that nobody at these tables is sitting there perfectly balancing their ranges. They aren't sophisticated math bots. They are living, breathing human beings, leaking emotions like fear, pride, relief, and anxiety all over the felt. Pressure creates leaks, and once you stop assuming everyone around you is a strategic genius, the game actually becomes remarkably easy to navigate. Which brings us to our final thought. The next time you sit down at a low-stakes table, just look around. Who are you going to spot first? Is it going to be the hoodie guy completely overthinking his ranges? The quiet old man just waiting to pounce on the river? Or maybe the nervous bluffer staring holes right into your soul? I challenge you to take what you've learned in this explainer, stop playing the cards, and start playing the people. The psychology is sitting right there in front of you, just waiting to be read. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one.